Can you see my page now? Can you see my page, my screen?
No, I only see I see your screen, but not the presentation.
And now?
Not. So in the meantime, good morning, everyone. We are setting up the presentation with the Liad. So in the meanwhile, we are waiting that all the people join. Okay. Thank you for the understanding. So Liad, try to share your only the PDF if you can.
Hold on, I need to save it as PDF. Hold on.
Just a few other minutes, guys. Okay, I see it.
You see the presentation? Okay, good.
Yes. Okay, so we're ready to start. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for attending this session. This is one of the Waste is More episodes. Today, I have the pleasure to have in our webinar as guest Liad Ortar. Liad is the senior technical manager EFRAG. EFRAG is the, maybe you know, of course, but is the European voice about the financial reporting. Basically, EFRAG support the European Commission about all the main principles for the reporting in general. Today, we're going to talk about waste. So, in particular, the E5 chapter, so waste management and recovery operation. Now I give the floor to Liad to explain exactly about about the ESRS E5, and in the meantime we can ask questions. Of course, for the audience, if you have any question, please type all the questions in the chat. Thank you, Liad. The floor is yours.
Yeah, great. Thank you for thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here. We're going to do that in a very interactive way, so feel free to stop me, questions. I would rather cover less material in depth than just hoover about everything. So I'm very happy to be here. And as presented, I'm a senior technical manager at the sustainability reporting part of EFRAG. EFRAG, European Financial Reporting Advisory Group. In the work in sustainability reporting, we are responsible on providing the technical advice, which is known as the ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standard, to the European Commission. There were some dynamics around this standard in the last year or two, but we will focus now on the what we call the simplified ESRS. So it's a reduced version of set one. Just to have a notice before we start, what I present now is based on the draft that we have provided to the European Commission. This is not the final text. The final text is to be provided by the European Commission. They've just closed last week another sort of a public consultation phase, which is called Have Your Say. And there's some comments I think the European Commission is processing. So until we'll have the ESRS as a delegated act, I think around October, more or less, don't catch me on the word, then you should examine and recognize that what I'm saying is a draft. Okay, it's not the final text, and we'll see where we land and if we have additional amendments to the ESRS. But I think more or less we have a steady understanding of how it's gonna look. And as told, I'm responsible about the E5 about resource use and circular economy. It is part of a larger construct of standards, of course. In the environmental one, so in general ESRS, we have ESRS 1 and ESRS 2, general requirement and general disclosure, just giving just an overall introduction about what a sustainability statement is. And then we have, of course, the social aspects and the governance aspect, and now we're diving into one of the environmental aspects. In environmental standard, we have E1 climate, E2 pollution, E3 water, E4 biodiversity, and E5 on resource use and circular economy. And E5 itself also is comprised of several sections. You can see E5 1, 2, and 3, it's policies, action, and targets. These are kind of fixed segments, fixed parts in each and every topic as standard. So you need to disclose what are your circularity or waste related policies, what are the actions, the allocation of financial resources and things like that, and what are the targets to the related environmental issues. And then E5.4 and E5.5, this is what we call the metrics, the place that you need to disclose how you count for the different performance indicators of the topical issues, the topical subjects. And E5.4 is basically, if you look at the structure, so E5.4 is basically the upstream of the production. So everything that comes into a facility, a factory, and undertaking boundaries, whatever it will be. So the key materials that you get into your facility. And then E5.5 is divided into two sections. One is products and services. I'll show that in a second. And the second one is waste. That is, you can look at that as the downstream and downstream. And of course, one company downstream is another company upstreams, and that's what we want to encourage in circular economy. So this is the product, and maybe I just say a few words about that. In the products, we would really like companies to disclose what are the circularity related attributes of their products. So we're talking about durability, we're talking about repairability, what we call extent of repairability, and the design recyclability rate. So how much of your product and the packaging can be recycled. So these are like the main parameters that we have decided to focus on, and it is very much aligned with the ESPR, Eco Design and Sustainable Product Regulation, and the Digital Product Passport. Also, you can find them over there, the same technical aspects. This is a more detailed things about the output. I'm gonna jump on that because we want to get to the waste. Okay, so here we come to the waste. So I'm going to take you through some stages that we go through when we generate the dissection and the disclosure about waste. And of course, if you have questions, just stop me. So this step number one, the one you start in is your report in understanding your waste and your waste streams. Okay, this is a very important thing. A waste stream is a definition in the Waste Framework Directive. In general, the Waste Framework Directive is the major piece of legislation that we take into account when we wrote the disclosure that relates to waste. And we have here, what you can see here, the waste and the waste stream, they are taken directly from the glossary of the ESRS. The glossary is the place in which we provide the clearance and definitions, okay? And it is a inseparable part of the standard. So the definitions and their explanation are part of the delegated act, are part of the actual text, and they're extremely important in all the standard, but especially in E5, as we have 29 different definitions based on the law, but also based on some global concepts that are globally recognized from ISO 59000 and other places. So we start with understanding your waste. So the undertaking shall disclose the following information on waste from its own operation, a description of the undertaking waste streams, and the total weight of waste. So these are the two main parameters. So one is the description of the waste stream. So what kind of waste streams do you generate? And there's some leverage, there's some flexibility around that. But waste streams, you can see that plastic, metal, organic, hazardous and non-hazardous. You need to create this definition for each and every topic, and the total weight. Okay, so we don't ask for the segregation on a waste stream versus weight, but of course you can do that, and probably you need to do that in order to understand what is the total weight of the waste generated. But this is what we request. That's in paragraph number 16. The step number 2 is to measure your waste. Of course, you need to measure in order to evaluate. And as you know, what is not measured is not managed. And you know this concept. And the undertaking shall disclose the following information waste. So we talked about the total waste generation. And then a very important aspect, the proportion of waste diverted from disposal expressed as a percentage of the total waste generated, with a breakdown between hazardous waste and non-hazardous waste, and a breakdown of the following operation type: reuse, recycle, and recovery operation. Everything that is in bold and italic, okay, it's a definition. So if you don't know what reuse is, you go back to Annex 2, to our, let's say, our lexicon or our dictionary, and you can know exactly where it's used. And of course, as I said before, it's based on the Waste Framework Directive. And then we first of all, we want to know what went into disposal and what was diverted from disposal, and then the phase after that, when you take all the waste that was diverted to disposal, we want to know what happened to that. So in that case, we look into incineration, landfill, and other disposal operation, and there's a full list of what does it mean. And of course, we have the final destination is unknown. It's a new data point that was introduced in the E5. It's a very technical thing. It's just kind of facilitating companies to close the mass balance. So just for example, if you do have in order to get to the 100%, and there are some percentage that you don't know where your waste ended, so you can put the number in order to get to 100%. Of course, it's like an own testimonial. If you have high percentage that your waste is unknown, so probably you have an issue that you need to deal with, and that's not a good attribute to yourself. You have a large percentage that you know, so it's not there as a dump site. It's not there that you can say 70%. I don't know what happened to that. But the goal here is just to help companies round up and get to 100% when there are the residual numbers that you don't know.
Sorry, Liad. So it's important to be compliant with the regulation, have a waste measurement.
Yeah, it's critical. It's not important. You cannot do without a measurement. Okay, you simply cannot comply with the ESRS if you don't have waste management. That's and you don't have number. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
There are places in ESRS that you can, let's say, explain or express your disclosure with, let's say, with a qualitative or a narrative disclosure. You have policies, you say what is it you intend on doing, and you have some more flexible, or like I said, the expected rate of durability. You can play around with the word, and you can say that in words, in qualitative sentences and paragraphs. In E5 in waste, it's a purely numerical quantitative standard. Okay, you need to measure your waste. You need to know how much was diverted for disposal and how much was weighted from to disposal and from disposal. And if it was for disposal, what you saw end of life, we do want to know if it went to incineration. Also, in other disposal, we have the reference to the to the energy recovery, and there's technical limitation. How do you qualify the burning of waste for energy generation? And there are very clear stipulations for that in the Waste Framework Directive in their annex over there. So
So
it's a
it's
very
important.
technical exercise, very technical exercise.
So it's important, Eliad, to know the ways, but only go deep and understand what is the, for example, the recycling quality to be compliant with the reporting.
Yeah, I don't know about the recycling quality, but to validate that it is recycled, I think
Okay.
it is important to have this kind of, let's say, environmental audits. I used to do that when I was a consultant and work with companies. I would go to the recycling contractor or supplier, the one that actually collect the garbage, and then they say, yeah, it went to recycle, and we know that there are a lot of instances that all of these contractors promise that the waste is being recycled, but at the end they end up in incineration someplace in some deserted place, or just loaded in on ships and then being discarded someplace along down the supply chain.
And
I just want
yes,
to add a clarification. The ESRS is a very structured reporting standard, but it is a simplified version. So it's a very narrow one. And as someone who's been dealing with circular economy for quite a long time, I think a lot of professionals that would look at this list would immediately say, well, it's not enough. We're also doing that. We're also doing other activities. How it doesn't encompass everything that we do with our waste, and there are so many other things that we do. You're absolutely right. Okay, so if you feel that there is a certain metrics which is not which doesn't exist in this specific articulation of disclosure requirements, you can do that on what we call entity specific disclosure. Okay, you can decide, for example, you have a high level of electronic waste, and the electronic waste is being dismantled in a special facilities, and then the metals are being extracted by a very eco-friendly process. Okay, and there's a certain amount of, let's say, of gold that's being generated out of your electronic waste, and you want to showcase that those numbers. You can do that. Okay, you're not limited to our disclosure. You should look at our disclosure requirements as a starting point, as a benchmark. That's where you start your journey. But if you have a very remarkable technological or any kind of or mechanical advancement in your recycling operations, and you have metrics that you measure that, you should add that. Okay, you should add
okay.
that. Yeah, I can say also it's very important for us, because when we do benchmark research, when you look at reports of companies, and we see that there are issues that are reported again and again, and they do not exist in our standard, we might consider maybe in the future adding them. Okay.
Okay. But what is the risk for companies that don't measure the waste, for example?
Well, look, maybe we'll look at that at two perspectives. First of all, there is a compliance risk in ESRS disclosure for big companies. Companies in scope of CSRD, they have an obligation to report. Okay, it's a law, and it's going to be transposed next year by member states, and the status is a delegated act. And of course, it is extremely important. All this information has to be audited. Okay, we are all waiting for what we call the limited assurance standard that's going to guide assurance auditors how to audit the information. On waste, it is reasonably not that complicated, because if you work with recyclers, you should get receipts, you should get measurements, you should get the weight that they received. It should be properly weighted in balanced scales and synchronized and validated in laboratories and places like that. But and of course, the environmental auditing of the value chain is also very important in that case. But So let's say that's what we call the regulation risk or the external risk. Of course, there are a lot of risks that are internal. Okay, for example, if you have hazardous waste which is not properly discarded, of course you're in a risk. If you have workers that are exposed to different risk, waste-related risks, that's hazardous risk, and that's health and safety. And I remember, just I give you an example. I worked with a multinational several years ago that produced very big a digital printing machine, and I worked with them. One day they got a phone call. Hey, we saw your printing machine thrown away in some valley someplace. And he said, well, it's not ours. We gave that to our contract. We gave it to our, let's say, our partners, and they bought it from us. Yes, indeed, they bought it for you, but in the end, your logo, it's your logo. So the actual recall operations and keeping track of your equipment and where it ends up, and you at the end the waste is yours, okay, and you have to exercise responsibility on that.
Clear.
Yeah, and of course the regulation in Europe around that is getting stricter and stricter. Look now what happened about all the textile related waste that is it's forbidden now to export that and to burn that.
Clear.
So it's yeah.
Liad, I suggest you to go on because we have 5 minutes. So, and then I would like to show to the audience Nando's waste monitoring solution. So
Yeah, I'm jumping here.
Okay.
Maybe I would just end up. So I think this is the fundamentals of the issue. I think we do have at the end the issue of radioactive waste. Radioactive waste is part of the environmental taxonomy, so it needs to be part of the E5. So it's also important. Probably not a lot of companies face radioactive waste. Maybe you know. For, let's say hospitals, places like that that also create radioactive waste, but also biological waste and contaminated waste. And of course, it is all subject to what we call fair presentation principle, because ESRS in its basis, it's a principle-based reporting. It's under fair presentation. And if, for example, you are a hospital and you report your waste stream and you do not include biological waste, then something fundamental is missing. So it's not going to pass the auditing schemes or the auditing program. So everything is under the fair presentation principle. I was very fast in running through the disclosure. So if there are any further questions,
Yes.
do feel free.
Of course, it's a really complex topic, Eliad. Thank you for your explanation. I give the floor to the audience, so let me know if you have any question. In the meantime, I want to share our dashboard. So all the topic covered by Eliad can be summarized saying that waste data area is important. With Nando, what we want to do basically is solve this issue. So with our monitoring solution, you can track all your waste data in real time in all your buildings. You can select the period, select the single building, select the single bin area, and then you see all the waste data. So you see the waste production, for example, the segregation quality, the ranking per building, and the disposal mistakes. Of course, all the data can be exported in Excel. You have a deep detail about the waste weight per waste stream, the waste weight per bin, the segregation quality, so the object analysis, for example, and the disposal mistakes. Having this information, a corporate can be compliant and also reduce the impact. Without knowing what are the problems, you cannot solve anything. Nando is a tool now that is used by more than 80 customers around the world. We use AI to collect information. There is the explanation in our website, but if you're interested in understanding how we collect all the waste data just using a simple picture, don't hesitate to reach us out. Someone has any question, or maybe I have a question for Liad to close in the meantime. So Liad, what is your suggestions to the for the corporates in general to be compliant? A technical recommendation or even a recommendation based on your experience to be more compliant with the regulations?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna focus my recommendation on a blind spot. Okay.
Okay.
And because I do think that the task or the goal of actual measurement, you're providing solutions. I think it's a technical challenge, but it's you can do that. Okay, it's something which is doable. You have the technologies, and you can do that properly. I think the main issue here is target setting. And I think a serious company should be able to put up target setting. Now, because ESRS is not a behavioral standard, so other than climate, so we do not say what is a good target and what is a bad target. We just request for targets. And here the room for leverage for companies quite vast. Okay, but I do want to ask companies to just look at in the EU statistics. What are the national targets? What are the local municipality targets? Because each and every company is working in a local surrounding, and be aware of what's going on around you, and set targets.
Correct.
And over there, we don't say what is a good target and what is a bad target, but we would like. I say we would. It's just more than a wish. It's more like a wishful thinking. We would like to see how companies set targets in waste reduction, in recycling, in everything, in reuse, in everything that relates to that. I think that would be a very important added value that companies can really contribute to this to progress in this field.
We have two questions. So the first one, really straight to the point, Liad, for which companies it is mandatory, and do they fall within the reporting scope? And the second one is why is measuring waste considered essential for effective waste management?
Well, the scope of CSRD is clear. Okay, so we're talking over 1,000 people and 450 million in turnover. But let's remember that the actual effect is not for the companies in scope, but is for the companies out of scope, that the companies in scope are dependent on them for information. So if you provide information, if you provide resources or materials, upstream or downstream, for companies in scope, it is as relevant for you as it is for companies in scope. You might not be forced to do that as the written law that requires to do so, but you need to know that once a legal term or a legal condition is being exercised by companies in scope, their obligability, their dependency on information from downstream or upstream companies is even much higher than it was before. So you need to be totally aware of that. So if you are a small provider for a company in scope, you have the obligation. You should know that you have let's say the potential or the coming obligation to provide the ESRS aligned information for the company to make life easier for it to comply with the disclosure requirements.
Okay, and the second one, why is measuring waste considered essential for effective waste management?
How do you measure effectiveness if not by measurements? Like
exactly.
It's just a matter of
this is the goal. This is the goal of Nando. So we want to provide data to solve a problem.
Yeah, and as I said before, it's a major managerial concept. What is not measured is not managed. As simple as that. And you need to measure stuff.
Okay. So, Liad, thank you. It was an incredible session because it's really difficult to explain a technical part of a regulation in 30 minutes. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. And this recording will be available on our website, of course. If you have any question, guys, especially technical, you can reach out to Liad directly on LinkedIn, for example.
Yeah.
He will answer. Liad, thank you again. It was
Very
really a
welcome. Good
pleasure.
luck in your company and your
Thank you, thank
in your,
you,
everything
thank
you
you
do.
for your time.
You're very welcome. All the best, my friends.
You
Ciao.
too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.